My name is Nicky Marsh, and I'm the Associate Dean for Research and Enterprise in the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, and I'm also the Co-Director of the Southampton Institute for Arts and Humanities. And my research is on the relationship between culture and economics. So I work on the ways in which people use culture to imagine all kinds of economic concepts around risk, around money, around finance, and around abstraction. I've got two kinds of experience of engaging with policymakers. So firstly, I've engaged with policymakers indirectly through working with the think tanks and the third sector organisations that are working with policymakers. And in that work, I was trying to influence the ways in which financial literacy is imagined and taught in schools and more broadly. I think we don't understand what money is. So I tried to make myself and my research part of those conversations so we get a better understanding at all levels of society of how money is made and how money functions and how we use money. More recently, I've got more direct experience with policymakers. My work on culture and regeneration is looking at the ways in which the levelling up agenda is being played out across the UK, and there I'm working with policymakers as they develop metrics for thinking about how we measure pride in place, in particular in the levelling up agenda. Public policy has been really, really invaluable for helping me learn to engage with policymakers. And I think about it and I think there's four different things that they've done. First of all, right from the beginning, they've helped me understand what's the relationship between my academic work and the policy landscape. So they've given us a very kind of broad engagement and understanding of what it is that policymakers are looking for. Secondly, they've helped introduce us to policymakers and they've facilitated the kinds of events that policymakers want to engage with. So here they were really, really important in developing a webinar series around culture and regeneration that I did with the Southampton Institute for Arts and Humanities, and PPS enabled that, and it also really enabled that to be kind of meaningful and productive. The third thing that PPS have done is provide us with capacity building. So they've given us policy associates and their policy expertise to enable us to do stakeholder mapping and policy mapping to understand specifically what that landscape looks like and where we should be inserting our research. And finally, they've given us really specific advice and policy associates who've helped us respond to DCMS calls for evidence and understand the very kind of particular bureaucratic process that involves of translating academic work into policy speak. So recently we responded to a call for evidence for DCMS around culture and levelling up, and they sat with us and showed us how to fill in those forms, the kind of register we should be using, the kinds of research that would hit home and land well with policymakers. So most recently, I've been working on an AHRC project called Feeling Towns. And in this project, we're working with 4 local authorities and Historic England as they learn to measure how people feel pride in their towns and what it means to feel pride in their towns. And we're examining this question of pride because it's risen up the political landscape really quickly in the last year. It's become one of the 12 missions of the Levelling Up agenda. And we know that as local authorities bid for funds for regeneration and for culture in their towns, they're going to be asked to think about the ways in which they feel about their place, whether they have pride in their high streets, in their local communities, and in the services that are offered. What's been really interesting about this work is the fact that we're working with policymakers as they themselves work out what this question of pride means. So we've been very excited and privileged to work with DLUC, to work with DCMS as they develop these metrics for pride. And that so far we've been able to have quite open conversations with them about our questions, our critical questions about pride, and why thinking about the methodologies of the arts and humanities, thinking about our creative approaches, about our community-based approaches, thinking about our place-based approaches, might productively contribute to this national conversation. Well, obviously, my first piece of advice would be to engage with PPS, to engage with their training sessions, to encourage your PhDs to become policy associates, to develop their kind of capacity and knowledge in your whole team to understand what it is that you can contribute to policymakers. But beyond that, I'd say that lots of our research, as it's happening, as we're so timely in our research, as it's developing and it's innovative, then thinking about what it means for policymakers is quite an exciting thing to do. So to think about its relevance that you might not be aware of, but that is implicit in that research.